ॐ विश्वंदर्पण दृश्यमान नगरी तुल्यन्निजान्तर्गतम् पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया बहिरिवोद्भूतं यथा निद्रया यस्साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयम् तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नारायणं पद्मभुवं वसिष्ठं शक्तिं च तत्पुत्रपराशरं च व्यासं शुकं गौडपदं महान्तं गोविन्दयोगीन्द्रमथास्य शिष्यं श्रीशङ्कराचार्यमथास्य पद्मपादं च हस्तामलकं च शिष्यं तन्तोटकं वार्तिककारमन्यान् अस्मद्गुरून् सन्ततमानतोऽस्मि श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः परब्रह्मनिष्ठं स्वतो धर्मनिष्ठं अहिंसैकनिष्ठं स्वशिष्यै सुजुष्टं यतीनां वरिष्ठं गुरूणां गरिष्ठं दयानन्दरूपं मदाचार्यमीडे नमः श्री परमार्थाय संसाराध्यासनाशिने श्रोत्रिय ब्रह्मनिष्ठाय तस्मै ब्रह्मविदे नमः सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् ॐ तपोभिः क्षीणपापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां मुमुक्षूणामपेक्ष्योऽयम् आत्मबोधो विधीयते. I welcome you all to the 12th class of the Atma Bodha series. We will start by reading verses 20 to verse 23 that we had covered in the last class. आत्मचैतन्यमाश्रित्य देहेन्द्रियमनोधियः स्वक्रियार्थेषु वर्तन्ते सूर्यालोकं यथा जनाः देहेन्द्रियगुणान् कर्माण्यमले सच्चिदात्मनि अध्यस्यन्त्यविवेकेन गगने नीलतादिवत् अज्ञानान् मानसोपाधेः कर्तृत्वादीनि चात्मनि कल्प्यन्ते भुगते चन्द्रे चलनादि यथाम्भसः रागेच्छा सुखदुःखादि बुद्धौ सत्यां प्रवर्तते सुषुप्तौ नास्ति तन्नाशे तस्मात् बुद्धेस्तु नात्मनः As we have seen, the Jiva has concluded that I am Apurnaha. I am deficient, wanting, inadequate. Whereas the truth is something that is entirely different, that the Jiva is Brahman. So, in order to trace how the Jiva came into this position, into this situation, we start with the Srishti Prakriya, which Bhagavad Pada explained in Atma Bodha. That in the beginning, before the Srishti, there was only Brahman. Sadeva Soumya Idam Akra Asi. The Sat alone was there. And the Sat is also Chit, which is this imperishable, limitless consciousness. Imperishable, all pervading, limitless consciousness. And Vedanta presents Brahman as the Upadana Karanam of the entire Srishti. Because any creation should have a material cause, and Brahman is the material cause. And therefore, the entire Srishti has to now emerge out of Brahman. But since Brahman is changeless, we have to bring in an additional factor, which is Maya, which is not really an additional factor because Maya is mithya, it is dependent upon Brahman for its existence. And Maya is the entire world that is about to emerge in an unmanifest form, exactly like the dream world is unmanifest in the waker's mind. Brahman, in association with Maya, brings out the entire world. And as we have seen, Jaganti Sargasthiti Layanyanti Budbudani Iva Varini. Worlds emerge like bubbles from water, and beings emerge like ornaments from gold. So, in the entire process of Srishti, creation, there is no new substance that is created. If we were to talk about the material is one and only one. Ekam eva advitiyam Brahma. Brahman alone is the material. It is interesting that Brahman is not really a material in the strict sense of the word. We say Brahman is non-material. Brahman is consciousness. So consciousness is the material cause of the world. That's why we say Abhinna Nimitta Upadana Karanam. It's a unified, intelligent and material cause. Consciousness is the material. Therefore, worlds and beings emerge from Brahman in association with Maya. And now that all the Sthula and Sukshma Upadhis of these beings have come about, Brahman, which is this limitless consciousness, as though enters each of these Upadhis and gets enclosed in these Upadhis. Just like space as though gets enclosed within pots. And then we talk about a multiplicity of spaces associated with different nama rupas. Now this one limitless consciousness, having been apparently enclosed within these different upadhis, now we talk about multiple consciousnesses associated with different nama rupas. These are all the jivas. So the jivas say that I am conscious. They are really referring to this enclosed consciousness in the upadhi. When they say, when the jiva uses the word I. But then the avarana shakti of Maya comes in and conceals the the Adhishthanam, conceals the true nature of Brahman. Therefore, the Jiva, instead of saying, I am Brahman, which is this limitless consciousness that just incidentally happens to be enclosed within this body-mind upadhi, now says that I am this body-mind. Because of the avarana shakti of Maya has concealed the nature of Brahman from the Jiva's vision. And therefore, the Jiva says, I am. Samanya Jnanam is there, but the Vishesha Jnanam that I am Brahman is not there. And therefore, the Jiva says, I am the body-mind. And superimposes the attributes of the body-mind upon this I that is really the limitless consciousness. So this is how the Jiva gets into this terribly mixed up state and says that I am apurnaha, I am deficient, I am wanting, I am inadequate. So now this Jiva is in this cycle of samsara. Because now the Jiva has to gain Purnatvam. And he sees this separate world, and that separate world is the only source of Purnatvam that he sees. So he runs after the world. And is never successful in becoming Purnaha. Never become Purnaha, never become limitless. The limited can never become limitless. So having suffered from samsara, having struggled when the jiva goes to the guru, now the guru cannot directly tell this jiva that you are Brahman, because that message will not sink in, because the jiva is so identified with the body-mind. He doesn't see any Brahman anywhere. And even if Brahman was there, that Brahman has to be something remote. I can never be that Brahman because I am so limited. And therefore, the first step is Atma Anatma Vivekaha has to be done. And Atma is this Brahman that is enclosed, is called Atma, renamed to be Atma. Therefore, the Jiva has to now sort out the mix-up relatively first, saying that Atma is not a part, product, or property of this body. Consciousness is not a part, product, or property of the body. Consciousness is an independent principle that pervades this body. So this kind of separation of the consciousness from this upadhi has to be done. And this is not a physical separation. Because physically there has not been a mix-up at all. Because Satyam can never get mixed up with Mithya. Like this man can never get married to the girl in his dreams. So physically there has not been a marriage of Atma and Anatma at all, because they belong to two different orders of reality. So where has this marriage, where has this unholy marriage happened? It has happened in his mind, in his buddhi. And therefore, he has to do the separation also in his buddhi only. There is no real separation that has to be done. Using the Shabda Pramana of Vedanta, this separation has to be done in the buddhi. Yukti avaghatataha, using yukti. And so as we saw that he has to come to an appreciation of the fact that consciousness is not a part, product, or property of the body-mind. Consciousness is an independent principle that pervades the body-mind and enlivens the body. And consciousness is not limited by the boundaries of the body-mind. So when this kind of a separation is done, then later on the Guru can bring the Mahavakya. You say, Tattvamasi, you this Atma, that is behind this body mind, is indeed one with Brahman. That is the cause of the entire Srishti. And then he jumps to the understanding that I am really Satyam Brahma. that I am the Satyam and all else is Mithya. Atma Satyam Tadanyat Sarvam Mithyate. And that understanding is what really liberates this Jiva. As we saw in verse number 20, and in fact, some of the verses before that says that the Atma has got no activity. All the activity belongs to the body mind. And so somebody may say, then why do we need to talk about the separate Atma at all? There we saw the example of the movie and the screen. That the screen doesn't play any role in the movie. The screen is not a character in the movie. But then without the screen, there cannot be any movie. So similarly, without the Atma, his body, mind, senses cannot even exist. And moreover, the body, mind, senses are all inert. And therefore, it's only in presence of the Atma that the body, mind, senses, they get existence as well as consciousness. Therefore, in the presence of the Atma, the body, mind, senses engage in the various activities. Just like all the people, they engage in various activities in the presence of the sun. The sun is not actively involved in any of the activities, but the sun provides the light in which all the activities take place. Then we saw how laymen as well as philosophers superimpose the activities of the body, mind, senses and the attributes of the body, mind, senses upon the Atma. And that's where we talked about Adhyasa. We saw the definition of Adhyasa, Atasmin Tat Buddhi. In not that, seeing that. So in the not snake, seeing the snake. In the not silver, seeing the silver. Similarly, in this I, the Atma, that is not the body, mind, senses, I see the body, mind, senses and their attributes. Like in place of the rope, I see the snake, but then I superimpose the snake upon the rope. Instead of the rope, I see the snake, and then I superimpose the attributes of the snake also upon the rope. I not only say this is a snake, I say it is a striped, poisonous snake. So similarly, laymen as well as philosophers superimpose the attributes and activities of the body, mind, etc. upon the Atma, the Hendriya Gunan, Karmani, Amale Satchidatmani, Adhyasyanti. They superimpose. They say that I am young, I am old, I am blind, I am deaf, I am emotional, I am disturbed, and I am Apurna. It is the mother of all these conclusions that I am Apurna. It is the gist. If you were to summarize all these conclusions, what is the essence of it? It is I am Apurna, deficient, wanting, inadequate. And then begins samsara, the search for Purnatvam in the world. And as we saw in verse 22, Kartritvadini Chatmani. So even the Kartritvam of the body, mind, senses is superimposed. Like we said, the Purva Mimamsa philosopher, he talks about doing karma. Why? Because he sees there's nothing other than the karta. The jiva is the karta who has to constantly engage in karma. And only karma can help accomplish something or get rid of something. And through that, one can get sukha. So therefore, one becomes a karta. And as a karta, one can never be complete, as we saw. That there's a to-do list is always there. And but as you check off items in the to-do list, more things get added. So the karta one can never be purna. And the karta always becomes a bhokta also. Karta is the one that has to face the consequences of the actions. Therefore, the bhokta is in the clutches of the law of karma. Therefore, the bhokta can also never be purna. And similarly, we can add pramata also here. The pramatritvam is also something that is superimposed. As a knower also, I can never be purna, because the more I know about the world, the more I know that I don't know. And then in the next verse we saw ragecha sukha dukkhadi buddhau satyam pravartate. So even all the attributes of the body mind like raga, dvesha, ichha, sukha dukkha, etc., they are also superimposed. And like we saw, the Nyaya Vaisheshika philosopher says that all of this raga, dvesha, etc., they are really attributes of the Atma. Therefore, Bhagavad Pada is refuting the Nyaya Vaisheshika, Nayayika here, by saying that if they were really attributes of the Atma, then whenever Atma is there, the attributes must be there. But in deep sleep state, the Atma is there. The Atma is there, but then Raga, Dvesha, Sukha, Dukkha, Ichha, etc. are not there. And therefore, they cannot be the attributes of Atma. This is using Anvaya Vyatireka logic. As we saw, that Anvaya Vyatireka is a system, is a method of Yuktihi. It's also a form of Yuktihi, where we say that if two things are inseparably related, then when one thing is present, the other should also be present. This is called invariable co-presence. Invariable co-presence or anvaya. And when one thing is absent, the other should also be absent. This is called invariable co-absence or vyatireka. So if Anvaya condition is satisfied and Vyatireka condition is satisfied, then we can say that the two things are inseparably related. So now the question is, are Raga, Dvesha, Sukha, Dukkha, etc. properties of the Atma, attributes of the Atma? Now Bhagavad Pada is talking about in Sushupti, Atma is there. But the Raga, Dvesha, Sukha, Dukkha, etc. are not there. So the condition of invariable co-presence is not met. And therefore, we reject that these are attributes of the Atma. On the other hand, if you take them to be attributes of the buddhi and apply the test of Anvaya Vyatireka, then buddhau satyam pravartate. When the buddhi is there, these attributes are there. Check mark. Anvaya is checked. Because invariable co-presence is there. In Jagrat Avastha and Swapna Avastha, buddhi is there. Raga, Dvesha, Sukha, Dukkha, Ichha, etc. are there. But in Sushupti, the buddhi has become resolved into the Karana Sharira. So the buddhi is not manifest. When the buddhi is not manifest, at that point, raga, dvesha, sukha, dukkha, ichha, etc. are also not manifest. And therefore, the test of invariable co-absence is also met. Therefore, we say that raga, dvesha, sukha, dukkha, etc. are attributes of the buddhi. Buddhehe, tasmat buddhehe, natu atmanaha. They don't belong to the atma. So with this, we will go to the verse, the new verse for today. Verse number 24. Prakasho kasyato yasya
प्रकाशोर्कस्यतो यस्य
shaityam agneryatoshnata
शैत्यम् अग्नेर्यथोष्णता
Swabhava Sat-Cit-Ananda
स्वभावः सच्चिदानन्द
Nitya Nirmalatatmanaha.
नित्य निर्मलतात्मनः.
So in all of these prior verses, we have been negating all of these attributes and activities of the Atma, Kartritvam, Bhoktritvam, Raga, Dvesha, Sukha, Dukkha, Ichha, whatever you name it. We have been negating all these attributes, saying they don't belong to the Atma. And then somebody may raise a question that if you are negating every attribute, then what is the nature of the Atma? And does Atma have any attributes at all? So Bhagavad-pada is answering this question here, saying Swabhavaha. Swabhavaha here means Swarupaha, the nature of something. Is that which can never ever be altered. Nature of something by definition is that which cannot be altered in that thing. So Bhagavad-pada gives a few examples here. Yatha arkasya swabhavaha prakashah. Prakasho arkasya. Prakashaha arkasya. So we can bring in, there is a Shaityam Agner Yatha. So if we do the Sandhi Vicheda here, Prakashaha Arkasya Toyasya Shaityam Agnehe Yatha Ushnata Swabhavaha Satchidananda Nitya Nirmalata Atmanaha. So there's a Yatha there. Shaityam Agnehe Yatha Ushnata. So we can bring that Yatha in and say Yatha Arkasya Swabhavaha Prakashaha. Like light is the nature of the sun. The light can never be separated from the sun. Unlike the moon has got borrowed light. But sun has got inherent light, which cannot be separated from the sun. So yatha arkasya swabhavaha prakashaha, yatha toyasya swabhavaha shaityam. In case of the sun, everything else, like the rising of the sun, the setting of the sun, or the sun sometimes appears large or sometimes appears small. When the sun is at the zenith, it appears small. When it's at the horizon, it appears to be large. So all of these are attributes that are from the standpoint of the upadhi. They don't really belong to the sun, the largeness or the smallness, or the rising or the setting, etc. But the prakasha is the inherent nature of the sun. So similarly, toyasya swabhavaha shaityam. The swabhava of water is its coolness. You will say, hey, but I can heat water. And water becomes hot. So we say that is true. But that is really foreign to the water. Because you have heated water, it has become hot. It is not inherent in the water. If you leave the water alone for some time, it returns to its natural state, which is its coolness. Therefore, coolness, shaityam, is the nature of toya. Toya means water. Agnehe swabhavaha ushnata. Like the swarupa of Agnihi is heat. Heat and fire can never be separated. There is no vyabhichara here. You can never see fire that is cold. Fire is always invariably hot. So similarly, if you were to ask what is the swabhava of Atma then? What is the swarupa of Atma? So Bhagavad Pada says, Satchidananda Nitya Nirmalata. This is the swarupa of Atma. So Sat, Chit, Ananda, Nitya Nirmalata. So what is Sat? Sat is existence. So what is existence? We normally use the word exist to say the pot exists, the cot exists, the mat exists. We talk about objects existing. Then what is this existence? Sat. The Swamiji talks about 5 features of existence also. 5 features of existence. It is very similar to the 5 features of consciousness. And there's a reason why there is so much similarity. We will look into that sometime. But here, the 5 features of existence are: existence is not a part, product, or property of any object. Existence is an independent principle that pervades every object and makes it exist. And existence is not limited by the boundaries of the object. And existence continues even if the object gets destroyed. And the 5th one is that this surviving, continuing existence, even after the object gets destroyed, cannot be transacted with, not because it is not there, but because there is no medium for it to manifest. Vedanta is teaching us that there is this existence, which is Sat, which is not a property, part, product, or property of the object. It is an independent principle. So how do we appreciate this? We take the example of gold and ornaments. Gold is not a part, product, or property of any ornament. Gold is an independent principle that pervades the ornament and makes it exist. Because without the gold, the ornament cannot exist. And gold is not limited by the boundaries of the ornament. Because you have one ornament here, you have another ornament here, and gold is gold in a world of ornaments. Gold is everywhere, not limited by one ornament. And gold continues to exist even when the ornament goes. Nothing happens to the gold. And finally, the gold that continues to exist cannot be transacted with in the form of wearing the gold, etc. In the limited example, you can say you cannot transact in the sense you don't go about wearing gold bars. So you can say that gold cannot be transacted with in the form of wearing. But that doesn't mean the gold doesn't exist. The gold is there, very much there. But there is no medium through which you can transact with the gold in the form of ornaments and wear it. So similarly, in this world, there is one principle which is Sat, which is really existence, which is not a part, product, or property of any object. It's an independent principle, pervades every object and makes it exist, and survives the destruction of every object. So Atma is that Sat. Atma, being one with Brahman, is really that Sat. Because we said in the beginning of Srishti, Brahman alone was there. Sadeva Soumya idam agra asit. Idam agre asit becomes idam agra asit because of a sandhi. Agre means in the beginning. So Sat alone was there. And we said this is the material cause. So it being the material cause, it has to pervade every object. It is not a part, product, or property of any object, pervades every object, makes every object exist. Not limited by the boundaries of any object. And It survives the destruction of every object. Every object is gone in pralaya, but then Brahman continues to be there. So Atma is of the nature of Sat. Atma is nothing but another name for the enclosed Brahman. That's all. So since Brahman is Sat, Atma is Sat. And then Atma is of the nature of Chit. So as we said, that Sat is available everywhere. Because Sat, wherever I say something exists, Sat is there. It is because of Sat that thing exists. But then Chit is not available everywhere for me, as we saw. Sada sarvagatopyatma na sarvatra avabhasate. Buddhau eva avabhaseta. So only in the presence of a sukshma sharira, chit aspect of Atma gets manifest. Therefore, I can't say this desk is conscious, the wall is conscious, but I can say this ant is conscious, this lizard is conscious, this human is conscious. Therefore, the chit aspect manifests only in the presence of a sukshma sharira. So then what is the chit? We are talking about manifestation of the chit in the body, mind, senses. So what is the chit? It's consciousness. Again, 5 features of consciousness. Consciousness is not a part, product, or property of the body, mind. Consciousness is an independent principle that pervades the body, mind, and enlivens the body. Consciousness is not limited by the boundaries of the body, mind. Consciousness continues to exist even after the death of the body mind. And the surviving consciousness that exists even after the body mind goes away cannot be transacted with, not because it is not there, but because there is no medium for it to manifest. So we can see the similarity between Sat and Chit in terms of the 5 principles. Really speaking, there is no difference between Sat and Chit at all. Sat is Chit, Chit is Sat. Consciousness is existence. Existence is consciousness. So Sat Chit Swarupa and then Ananda Swarupa. So the manifestation of Sat is everywhere. The manifestation of Chit requires a special medium of the Sukshma Sharira. And Ananda is this fullness, wholeness, limitlessness of the Atma. The manifestation of that requires a conducive state of mind called Anandamaya Kosha. Only in the Anandamaya Kosha, which is a conducive state of mind, the fullness, wholeness, limitlessness of the Atma manifests in the form of experiential happiness. Happiness that is experienced, the happiness that comes and goes. What is the source of it? He said, no object in the world even has an iota of happiness. The happiness that is experienced, the source of it is the Atma, which is of the nature of Ananda. And in the presence of Atma, when there is a conducive state of mind, the Atmananda manifests in the form of this happiness that is experienced. And how is this conducive state of mind attained? Generally speaking, it is attained when an object of desire is accomplished. When one is united with a certain object of desire. At that point, the mind is in a conducive state. And in that conducive state of mind, the Atmananda manifests. But then, as we have seen, the human being mistakes this experienced happiness, mistakes the source of it to be the object. But as we have discussed a lot in the fundamentals of Vedanta series, no object has got an iota of happiness. If an object inherently had happiness, it should make everyone happy. Or it should continue to give happiness to this person as long as he is in possession of the object. But we say neither of these are true. So in that particular state of mind, Anandamaya Kosha, the inherent nature of the Atma, that is Ananda, manifests. That is what we call experiential happiness. So when we say Atma is of the nature of Sat-Cit-Ananda, we are not saying that the experiential happiness is the nature of Atma. Experiential happiness comes and goes. What comes and goes cannot be the nature of anything. Ananda, this fullness, limitlessness, wholeness is the nature of Atma. Sat-Cit-Ananda. So then one may ask, and then you're saying that Sat-Cit-Ananda, etc., is the nature of Atma. So are they attributes? Does Atma have any attributes? Or are these the attributes of Atma? We say that these are not the attributes of Atma. Because Atma is a drik. And the drik is always the drik, the seer, never the seen. And all attributes belong to the seen, never to the seer. Therefore, Atma is attributeless. So we say that Sat, Chit, and Ananda are not the attributes of Atma, but that is the very nature of Atma. And then Nitya Nirmalata. Nitya Nirmalata. So here there are two ways we can look at it. We can say Sat, Chit, Ananda, and Nitya. Being Nitya is the nature of Atma. So here we can look at it in two ways. We can take Nitya to be separate as the nature of Atma. We can say Atma is Nitya. So imperishable means Atma itself doesn't have any birth or death. As we have seen that birth or death, they really belong to the Sthula and Sukshma Sharira. The association of the Sukshma Sharira with the Sthula Sharira is what we call birth. And the dissociation of the Sukshma Sharira from the Sthula Sharira is what we call death. But Atma is not really involved in this process. Atma is just providing the Adhishthanam, and Atma is providing the existence and consciousness. And Atma is Asangaha, as we have seen. Asangaha means space-like. It is not related to anything because it is Satyam. Satyam is not related to Mithya at all. And therefore, Atma doesn't have any connection to this process of birth or death. Atma itself doesn't have any birth or death. That is a association of the Sukshma with the Sthula Sharira, or dissociation of the Sukshma Sharira from the Sthula Sharira. And moreover, if Atma were born, if we were to say Atma is born, then what could Atma be born out of? Because before the birth of Atma, then there would not be any Atma. And birth would be an event where Atma comes about. So before the birth of Atma, there would only be Anatma. So if we have to say that Atma is born, it would mean that Atma is born out of Anatma. But we say that this is ridiculous. It is like saying that sand is born out of mirage water. The mirage water is supported by the sand. So support cannot be born out of what is supported. Or saying that the waker is born from the dream, or in the dream the waker is born. In the dream that is supported by the waker cannot be born. If there is a dream, there must be a support. The waker must exist. So for Anatma to exist, Atma has to be there. Therefore, Atma cannot be born out of Anatma. Therefore, Atma is never born and it never dies. And nirmalata, Atma is ever pure. It is free of all these limiting attributes that we have seen. Because all the attributes belong to the drishyam, never to the drik. Therefore, Atma is free of all these attributes. Moreover, Atma being Satyam is never affected by the attributes of Mithya. Therefore, Atma is Nirmala, ever pure. Or we can look at it as Nitya Nirmalata, where Nitya becomes an adjective for Nirmalata, meaning it is always pure, it is always untainted. So eternally free of all these attributes. Or we take the example, if we take the example of the rope snake, then before the snake came into existence, we say the rope was there. So before the superimposition of the snake, the rope was there. And after knowledge, when the superimposition is removed, also the rope alone is there. But during the superimposition, what is there? We would be tempted to say that the snake is there. But we say that even during the superimposition, the rope alone is there. The rope has not been tainted in the least by the snake. So, Satyam again is never touched by the attributes of the Mithya. So similarly, even during the Ajnana Kala, the snake is superimposed during the Ajnana Kala. Similarly, during the Ajnana Kalam of the Jiva, the Jivatmam and all its limited attributes have been superimposed on the Atma. But even during the state of superimposition, Atma is untainted. It is still ever pure. It is Nitya Nirmala. Even for an ignorant person, Atma is Nitya Nirmala. Then what is this purification that we talk about? We say that an Ajnani has to purify, right? Has to go through this Chitta Shuddhi, etc. Right? So there it is really Chitta Shuddhi. It is purification of the mind that we are talking about, not the purification of the Atma. So even for an ignorant person, Atma is ever pure, untouched, and is liberated. Atma is ever liberated. Even for the ignorant person, Atma is liberated. The problem is he doesn't know that Atma is liberated. So in order to know that Atma is ever pure, one needs a pure mind. But even for a person who has an impure mind, Atma is still ever pure. So this knowledge, Atma Jnanam, can take place only in the pure mind. And the knowledge, the Atma Jnanam, is a knowledge that Atma is always liberated. I am always liberated. The Nitya Nirmalata. So here Bhagavad Pada has told us the nature, the Swarupa of the Atma. So now we go to the next verse. Verse number 25. Atmanas Satchidanshascha
आत्मनः सच्चिदंशश्च
Buddhirvrittiritidvayam
बुद्धेर्वृत्तिरिति द्वयम्
Sanyojya cha vivekena
संयोज्य च विवेकेन
Janamiti pravartate.
जानामीति प्रवर्तते.
So one may raise a question here that you say that Atma is ever changeless. Like we have said, Atma is nirvikaraha, ever changeless. But then when I know something, like I say, I know a pot, I know a cloth, I know a piece of cloth. So in all of this, the knowledge is taking place. So isn't Atma changing? So here again, it is not the layman alone who may have such a question, but even the philosophers, the Nayayika is mixed up in this respect. Because the Nyaya philosopher says that this Jnanam is an attribute of Atma. Jnanam is a guna of the Dravya called Atma. So here Bhagavad-pada is clarifying that Atma is beyond all transactions. So in Mandukya Upanishad, there is a word called avyavaharyam. That Atma is avyavaharyam. That is what Bhagavad-pada is talking about here. Atma is beyond all transactions. We can talk about two types of transactions. Karma vyavahara or jnana vyavahara. Karma vyavahara involves the karta who employs the karmendriyas and does the karma vyavahara. Or it may even be a form of upasana where it is a manasa karma, where the mind is made to do something. Or there can be jnana vyavahara, where the jnata or the pramata knows things in the world or knows various things. This is called jnana vyavahara. So Bhagavad-pada is pointing out that Atma is not involved in any of these transactions, be it karma vyavahara or jnana vyavahara. The kartritvam we have already negated. Like we said, kartritvadini in the earlier verse, that was already negated. So here, Bhagavad-pada is talking about pramatritvam, or knowership. So doership has already been negated in the Atma. Here is talking about knowership. So now the question is, Atma the pramata, the knower, is Atma the pramata? So we say Atma is not the pramata also. Then who is the pramata? That is the question. So to understand this, we'll go back to our favorite example of a room. Let's say there is a room with a window and it's pitch dark outside. So all the objects are in darkness. And there's a small window in the room. And in the room there is a lamp, a very bright lamp, which is a source of light. So now this person wants to look outside of the window and he cannot see anything. So he takes a mirror and he places it next to the window. And the light of the lamp falls on the mirror. And now the mirror becomes a dazzling mirror, dazzling with light, bright mirror. And then he directs this mirror to things outside. And the light from the mirror, when it falls on things outside, it illuminates the various things. So now there are a few things here. There's the lamp, number one, lamp. Then there's the light. Then there's a mirror. Then there are objects outside. Then there is darkness. 5 things. Now each of these 5 things have parallels in our real world example. So in the real world, we say that the equivalent of the lamp is the Atma, which is the source of consciousness. So in this world, in this world that we talked about of the room and objects outside, light is required to know anything, to illumine anything, the light is required. Similarly, in our world, to know anything, consciousness is required. So the lamp is the source of light. Similarly, Atma is of the nature of consciousness, or you can say source of all consciousness. The lamp, the parallel to the lamp is the Atma, parallel to the light is consciousness. The parallel entity to the mirror is the mind. And then now the mirror is able to illumine other things. Similarly, the mind is able to illumine other things with reflected consciousness. The mirror, the mind glows with reflected consciousness. And then the mind is able to illuminate other objects. So there are objects outside in both cases. And the equivalent of the darkness is ignorance. So darkness envelops the objects outside. Similarly, ignorance envelops all the objects outside. So now what happens is that this association with consciousness is required for any object to be known, just as association with light is required for any object to be known. So how does any object get associated with consciousness now in this world? That is the question, right? So here we said that the mind is made of the Sukshma Panchabhutas. Therefore, the mind is able to borrow consciousness, is able to reflect consciousness. So there is reflected consciousness in the mind. Now, when any thought arises in the mind, the thought is also made of the subtle Panchabhutas. And therefore, the thought, even as it arises with this reflected consciousness. So the thought already has consciousness associated with it. So in order to know the thought, right, I don't need any special association of the consciousness because the thought by itself, as it rises, is associated with consciousness. Therefore, thought is automatically known even as the thought arises in my mind. Therefore, when I have feelings of happiness in the mind, experiential happiness or anger, kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, whatever is happening within my mind, I don't know it because those are thoughts, modifications of the mind that automatically have this reflection of consciousness. They are shining with reflected consciousness. But these objects outside, they are not known to me unless they get associated with consciousness. So now how does this object outside get associated with consciousness? We say that the thought of the mind has to go out and take the form of the object. So there's ghata, a pot outside. So the thought that rises in the mind has to go out through my chakshurindriyam and contact the pot and take the form of the pot. So then this ghatakara vritti takes place in the mind. Now this ghatakara vritti, like we said, is imbued with this reflection of consciousness. It shines with the reflection of consciousness. So just like the light from the mirror that goes out and it removes the darkness and illumines the object, similarly, this vritti from the mind goes out and takes the form of the object. When it takes the form of the object, it removes the ignorance of the object. The darkness goes when it's contacted by the light. Similarly, here the ignorance goes when it's contacted by the vritti. So there are two things, Vishaya Avarana Nivrittihi and Vishaya Prakashaha. So the ignorance goes and then the object is illuminated. So this Ghatakara Vrittihi is associated with the reflection of consciousness. And this is what we call pot consciousness or pot knowledge or Ghata Jnanam. So this is how the pot knowledge takes place. So here there are two things if we note. There is the mind that is shining with the reflection of consciousness. The mind is associated with the reflection of consciousness, the mind as a whole. And then every vritti in the mind is also associated with the reflected consciousness. So this buddhi pratibimbita chaitanyam, this reflected consciousness in the mind, is what is called the pramata, the knower. And this vritti pratibimbita chaitanyam, this reflected consciousness that is there with the ghatakara vritti, is what we call jnanam or prama. So pramata is the buddhi pratibimbita chaitanyam, prama is the vritti pratibimbita chaitanyam. As we have seen in the first knowledge principle, when the pramanam comes in contact with the prameya, then the prama takes place in the pramata. So we talked about the pramata and the prama. So the pramata is there. Initially, this buddhi pratibimbita chaitanyam is there. And then the vritti that goes out through that particular sense organ, right, before taking the form of the pot, that is the praman. That requires the functioning of the sense organ. So that is the pramana vritti. And then the pramana vritti takes the form of the object, it becomes the prama. The pramanam comes in contact with the prameya, and the object outside is the prameya. So pramata, pramanam, prameya, prama. This is the process of knowledge. So in this, the buddhi pratibimbita chaitanyam is the pramata. The vritti pratibimbita chaitanyam is the prama. So now what we are saying is that the original consciousness is there, right? The original consciousness is not any of these, the pramata, the pramanam, the prameya, the prama. Original consciousness is just providing the illumination for this entire process. So this entire process of knowledge is related to this pratibimbita chaitanyam, or the reflected consciousness. Because again, anvaya vedireka, in deep sleep, sushupti, this reflected consciousness, etc., is also resolved. All of this is resolved. All of this equipment for gaining knowledge is resolved. And therefore, there is no jnana vyavahara. But then in Jagra Avastha, there is this jnana vyavahara. Therefore, we say that the reflected consciousness is the one that is associated with this jnana vyavahara. That is the pramata. And I am the original consciousness. I am not really connected to this transaction directly. I am just illumining this entire process. Therefore, he says, Atmanah Satchidamshascha Buddhehe Vrittihi iti dvayam. Atmanah Satchidamshascha Buddhehe Vrittihi iti dvayam sanyojya. So he's talking about how this process of knowledge is taking place. So here Bhagavad Pada doesn't directly refer to the pramata being the Atma Chaitanyam, the Satchidamshaha. Satchidamshaha is really referring to the original consciousness, Satchit. So here Bhagavad Pada is not really directly talking about the pramata being the buddhi pratibimbita Chaitanya. He assumes we know that from other sources. So here he is only talking about the jnanam being the vritti pratibimbita chaitanya. So here he says Atmanaha Satchidamshaha. So the Sat and Chit aspect of the Atma and the Buddhi Vrittihi, Buddhehe Vrittihi, the Ghatakara Vrittihi, they come together. These two, Dvayam, Sanyojya, these two come together. And then this reflected consciousness is formed. This Pratibimbita Chaitanyam is formed. So that is the Jnanam. So now it is really the Pramata, the Jnata, that is the knower. And he is the one who I should be saying the Jnata. Jnata knows the ghata. The knower knows the pot. But what do I say? I end up saying, I know the pot. Say, I know the pot. And I am the Jnata. Bhagavad is pointing out that there is a mix-up here. Avivekena, there has been a mix-up when one says that. If one says that I, the Jnata, am the one who is knowing the pot, then there has been a mix-up here. Because if we say that I am the original, I am the original face, I have the original face, and then I see the reflected face in the mirror. Now the reflected face in the mirror, let's say the mirror is it's really a pool of water, and then the pool of water has some movement. So the reflection is moving along with the pool of water. The reflection is getting affected by that vyavahara. Now, I should not be saying I am getting affected. I should say the reflection is getting affected. The reflection is involved in that movement. So if I say I am involved in the movement, there has been a mix-up, confusion. So similarly here, avivekena janami iti pravartate. It is because of confusion that I say janami, meaning I know. I am associated with the knowledge transaction. I should be saying the reflected consciousness is the seer, the hearer, the thinker, the knower, etc. But because of aviveka, because of ignorance and mix-up, I say I am the hearer, thinker, seer, knower, taster, smeller, all of this. The Atma is taken to be the knower. This is the mix-up. So I, the Atma, am just a witness consciousness. I don't have any connection with this transaction. So I illuminate the knower, the known, and the knowledge. It's Triputi, it's called the Triputi, the knower, known, and the knowledge. All of this is illuminated by me. In my presence, all of this happens. But I am not involved in this jnana vyavahara. So this is the confusion Bhagavad is clearing. And therefore, pramatritvam, jnatritvam also doesn't belong to the Atma. We negated kartritvam, bhoktritvam, and pramatritvam, the Atma. Now we will also look at the next verse also, because it is a related verse. Atmano vikriya nasti.
Atmano vikriya nasti.
Buddher bodho na jatviti.
Buddhe bodho na jatviti.
Jiva sarvamalam jnatva.
Jiva sarvamalam jnatva.
Jnata drashteti muhyati.
Jnata drashteti muhyati.
So it is not drishteti, but drashteti. So somebody may raise a question here that Why do you need to introduce this reflected consciousness? Reflected consciousness is called Chidabhasa. Chidabhasa. Why do you need to introduce this reflected consciousness? Because there is generally a principle which is called Laghavam. Laghavam means you try to explain something with the minimum possible moving parts. Try to explain a certain phenomena in the simplest possible manner. And in English, the equivalent is called the Occam's razor. Means you try to explain something in the with the simplest with the with if there are multiple explanations for a phenomenon, then the simpler explanation is the preferred explanation and likely the truer explanation also. So similarly, why do you need to bring in this reflected consciousness? Are we making it more complex than needed? So Bhagavad is defending this here, saying that the knowing process cannot belong to the pure Atma. And the knowing process cannot belong to the pure mind also. So Atmanaha Vikriya Nasti. In Atma there is no change. Since there is no change, Atmanaha Vikriya Nasti. So any process always involves a change. So even knowing something is a process that involves a change. Therefore, Atma alone cannot be responsible for this process. Atma cannot be this knower because it is changeless. It cannot be responsible for this process of knowledge. Just like this bulb, the lamp or the light alone, right, cannot illumine objects outside by itself. It needs the participation of the mirror also. On the other hand, buddhehe bodhaha na jatu iti. The buddhi, on the other hand, by itself, it is not even sentient. It doesn't have any consciousness by itself. So the buddhi alone cannot also be responsible for this knowing process. Just like the mirror by itself cannot illumine anything outside. If we were to switch off this lamp and just use the mirror by itself is useless. It cannot illumine anything. So knowing is associated with this third entity, which is this reflected consciousness. A third entity is required. A mysterious third entity arises in the presence of this Atma and this Buddhi, which is responsible for this knowing process. The Atma alone is not responsible for the knowing process. The Buddhi alone is not responsible for the knowing process. In the presence of Atma, the Buddhi and the Buddhi, there is a third entity that arises that is responsible for the knowing process. Exactly like in presence of this lamp and the mirror, a third entity, which is this reflected in the mirror that arises, that is responsible for the illumination of the objects outside. And this third entity is what we call the Chidabhasa, or this reflected consciousness. And this is what is generally called the Jiva also. In the presence of Atma, this body-mind complex that is insentient gets sentiency because of borrowed consciousness, reflected consciousness. This is the Jiva, Chidabhasa, reflected consciousness. And this Jiva, Sarvam Alam Gyatva. So this Jiva, this reflected consciousness. Right? So when we say the reflected consciousness also cannot exist by itself. When we say reflected consciousness, there is always a reflecting medium. which is the body-mind complex, which is the reflected medium or the RM. This reflected consciousness we call the RC. So the RC is always backed by the RM, which is the reflecting media and the original consciousness. So there are these three things that come together: reflected consciousness, the reflecting media, and the original consciousness. This is the Jiva. So this Jiva, alam gyatva. So alam gyatva means knows enough. It knows enough to commit a mistake. It doesn't know everything. It knows enough. The Samanya Jnanam is there, but the Vishesha Jnanam is not there. If it knows I am, this body-mind complex in the presence of Atma becomes sentient, begins to say I am, because of this reflected consciousness. So it knows that I am. And then it can say this is a pot, this is a cart, this is a mat, this is a horse, whatever. All of these knowledge transactions are taking place. So I am, and the knowledge transactions are taking place, and therefore it says, I am the Jnata. Jnata drishta iti muhyati. Becomes deluded and says, I am the Jnata, I am the drashta, I am the seer, I am the knower, I am the thinker, I am the hearer, I am the taster, etc. But really speaking, who is he really? He is the original consciousness. Who are you? Are you the original face or the reflected face? You'll always say, I am the original face, not the reflected face. But then the problem is the reflection takes itself to be the original. Reflection takes itself to be the original. And that because of the mix-up, starts to say that I am the knower, I am the thinker, etc. So it has lost sight of the fact that there is this original Atma. It is like that mirror saying, right? Mirror with the reflected light saying, I am the one who is illuminating everything here. Having forgotten the fact that the source of all this is the lamp. The lamp is the is the one that is providing the illumination for this entire thing. So the reflected light should really be saying that I am the original light. So here, having done this mix-up, says that I am the original, and I am the knower, I am the hearer, thinker, taster, etc. Jnata drashta iti muhyati. And once he has taken himself to be this jnata, he has become limited. Knower is always limited. The pramata is always limited. And then the karta, bhokta, etc. All of this comes about. So therefore, the jiva says that I am apurnaha. When he says jnata, drashta, I am the jnata, I am the drashta, automatic implication of all this is that I am apurnaha. All of this is due to aviveka. So really speaking, the jiva, the reflected consciousness, should use the equipment of the body-mind and claim that aham brahmasmi, I am the original consciousness. But instead, he's saying that I am this limited knower. So here, because of aviveka, he has superimposed purnatvam on oneself. Therefore, one has to do this atma, anatma, viveka, and see that consciousness is not a product, or property of the body-mind. Consciousness is an independent principle that pervades the body-mind and enlivens the body-mind through this reflection. I have to claim that I am the original consciousness. We'll continue on this in the next class. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.